the age of the Janapadas resulted in the formation of urban centers as there was an expanding agrarian economy. The development of agriculture was conducive to the sustenance of non-agrarian sector of economy, and in the non-agrarian sector we have active presence of craftsmen, reference to diversified crafts groups, and of course merchants and traders in the milieu of 6th century BC. In the Ganga valley, we find that the representation of craftsmen in literature is immense. The Pali canonical literature refers to diverse crafts and professions, and the term used for this is sippa. The term sippa meant not only craftsmen but other occupational groups also. We have, other than the craftspeople, reference to traders and then merchants who were also given the epithet kammam. The Pali text Sutta Nipata, Digha Nikaya and others refer to different kinds of crafts that were followed in the society, and these are the yanakara, that is the wheel maker, the kammara, the crafts of the blacksmith, vardhaki, that is the carpenter, malakara, the garland maker, then we have suchikara, the needle maker, nalakara, the reed maker, and some other also different kinds of crafts are also referred to. If we look at the field archaeological materials that were found during the 6th century BC, we find that field archaeology also supplements the information about the crafts that we get from Pali literature. Ganga valley was the prime center where we have the proliferation of the crafts, and these people were generally living in the cities, and sometimes we have the crafts group living near the cities and serving the clientele of the city. We also have reference to crafts group living in the fringe of the city areas, for example, the nalakara, that is the reed maker, because Pali text talks of a village inhabited by the nalakaras, nattaka. Therefore, the diversity of crafts, the localization of crafts groups is seen in the Pali literature. One of the very important crafts groups were those of the blacksmith. From the field archaeological materials, we have reference to immense number of iron tools, and this also supplements our knowledge of the blacksmith that we find from Pali literature. Now, if we look at the Pali canons, we find that the kammara, the blacksmith, or sometimes they are also they dealt in metal, and so they could also be regarded as metalsmith, were highly regarded in the society, even though their sippa is known as a hina sippa. Actually, it is important to note here that in the Buddhist literature we find variations in the different kinds of crafts. So, some crafts are, or some occupational groups are known as ukkatta sippa and others are known as hina sippa. But the fact remains that the kammara were very important in the social milieu, and therefore we find that the Buddha also respected the kammara. We have reference to a person who actually gave the last meal to Buddha during his parinirvana, and Buddha was very much impressed by this man and he stayed with him. He was referred to as kammara putta. The epithet putta means that he was the son of a blacksmith. In the Pali canons, sometimes we find reference to kula and putta. So, when they are talking of kula associated with a particular crafts group, it means that it talks about a family. And so, if someone is given the epithet kula, then it talks means that the entire family was practicing that same crafts specialization. Therefore, we find that craft specialization and localization was very important right from the 6th century BC. We find that field archaeological material give us enough evidence of iron tools, iron implements. Therefore, we have iron edges, iron shaped plowshares from the different archaeological sites of No, Atranjikhera, Prahlhadpur, Patna, Rajgir and others, which are very important archaeological sites for the production of iron tools. Iron tools have also been found from the peninsular India in the context of megalithic culture. But it is important to note that when we are talking of the megalithic culture, we do not find iron plowshares there, and therefore perhaps the kind of urbanization that we find in the 6th century BC in the Ganga valley is not seen in the megalithic cultures of peninsular India, even though they have the use of iron implements. Another very important craft associated with daily life was that of the kumbhakara, that is the craft of the potter. Kumbhakara was quite respected in the Pali canon, and therefore we find that even a kumbhakara whose name was Ghotikaro, he was a devout follower of Kassapa Buddha, and even though he was not very wealthy and he could offer Kassapa Buddha only rice and curry, Kassapa Buddha stayed in his place, in his house, and was very fond of him. He was very affectionate towards Ghotikara. Therefore, potters were, albeit they were having a low sippa, hina sippa, but they were having some kind of ritual status in the milieu of 6th century BC and even after that. Regarding field archaeology, we find that we have presence of exclusive, very beautiful pottery during this period coming from the urban centers, and we all know about the northern black polished ware, which was particularly evident from the Ganga valley and the regions around. From the 6th century BC to 3rd century BC, the geography of NBP potteries were found in the northwest India till Bihar region. Now, this kind of pottery, the northern black polished ware, is marked by a highly black polish, and it is termed as a deluxe pottery by many scholars. The reason of it being called a deluxe pottery is twofold. One, because when you find NBP in a context with other kind of potteries, for example, the PGW, the painted grey ware, or the black and red ware, you find the number of NBP ware are much less than the other potteries. So, this completely wheel-made pottery with a fine lustrous polish was not used for daily usage or daily use. Otherwise, you would have got it in bulk from the archaeological sites. Another important factor why it is termed as a deluxe pottery and is always associated with urban centers is that we have evidence of NBP being repaired. This is very important because a pottery which has been broken is not thrown away. On the other hand, it is remanufactured, it is repaired, which suggests that it was a deluxe pottery and was important for the household. Thus, NBPW gives us enough evidence of the quality of a potter's craft. Kumbhakaras are also referred to in different literatures where we find their active presence in the social negotiations. The third group which are important in the context of artisans were that of the vastrakaras or the weavers. We have reference to the weaving community known as the Tantubaya in the Pali canonical literature. But what is interesting is that a Tantubaya is differentiated from a turnavaya and from a suchikara. When you have different kinds of crafts, having different kinds of people working on these, you can understand that these were highly specialized, and we shall see later on that these crafts were highly localized also. Varanasi remained a very important place where you have a continuous tradition of weaving. But apart from Varanasi, there are other places in North India which also saw the weaving tradition flourish during the period of our choice. Another very important craft related to urban life was that of a jeweler, malakara. We have the presence of different kinds of precious metals, semi-precious stones, jewelers' workshop found from archaeological sites. So, when the Pali literature gives us reference to a malakara and talks about the presence of malakara in the society, we can very well tally it with the field archaeological materials where you have excavations which give us findings about different beads, very important semi-precious stones. For example, we have presence of lapis lazuli which has been brought from Afghanistan. We have carnelian, we have agate, jade, and so a whole gamut of beads and semi-precious stones in the early historic period. So, this kind of presence of archaeological material supplemented by literature is very important for understanding the nature of the crafts group in this period. We do not have much information regarding the dantakara, that is the ivory workers, but their presence is recorded and they definitely were a very specialized craft group. In the later period, in the post-Mauryan period, we find that the ivory workers were very active and they were much in demand because ivory was a product which was used in the trade network and which was a luxury item and had great purchase value. Regarding the suchikara, the needle maker, what is interesting is that a suchikara is differentiated from a suchi vanijja. So, you have reference to suchikara, a needle maker, and then you have reference to a needle trader, which suggests that some sort of trading activity was going on in needles. We have reference to suchaka, who is a needler, and a suchaka's occupation was using needle for goading animals, and so he was castrated in a society and not looked upon very positively by the Varna society. The kosiyakara, who is a silk weaver, often violated the regulations of the Varna society, because in the Varna society there is an injunction, or even in the Buddhist and Jain society you have injunction of not to kill animals. But as we know that silk was woven from a silkworm, and to sustain his family, a kosiyakara had to violate the norms of a Buddhist or a Jaina society, Jaina strict scriptures. Malakara was very common and their craft was needed for different kind of ritual activities. Therefore, kammara, kumbhakara, vastrakara, these sort of crafts had, or the craftsmen who were performing this sort of crafts had some sort of financial strength in the society, and where, albeit they are following a low sippa or a hina sippa as mentioned in the Buddhist text, had some presence in the society. When we look at the different functions of these craftsmen, we find that a very important part of craft economy was formation of guilds. in Panini's Ashtadhyayi, which is datable to around 5th century BC, we find references to the term Sreni, Puga, Shangha, which are similar to guild, which is a term used in the European context. So, such kind of guild-like organizations were prevalent, and we had craftsmen's guild as well as merchants' guilds, and also guilds by some occupational groups. The guilds are very famous in the post-Mauryan period, but the genesis of these Sreni-like organizations can be seen in the 6th century or 5th century BC, when we find the literature also talking about the formation and structure of these guilds. The Gautama Dharmasutra talks about the merchant guilds and the crafts guilds, and he says that these guilds had their own respective rules and regulations. So, it is very important that these guilds could form their own laws and customs, and they were not under the rule of the state. The kings could not have any kind of order on the or any kind of authority over the guilds. They were independent, and when we see the structure, we find that there were a general assembly, and then in the general assembly there was a guild head who was known as a pramukha or a jettaka. And this pramukha and jettaka sometimes belong to the particular guilds, because we have reference to malakara jettaka or vadhaki jettaka, and again we find that these professions, the profession of the crafts, were most of the time hereditary, because we see that the son of a master mariner, that is mahanavika, becomes a mahanavika in the stories of the Jatakas. The Jataka stories are a little late, but they give us information on the society and economy of the 6th century BC or of the period of the Janapadas. So, in the Jatakas, we have a vivid description of the localization of these craft guilds. Thus, we have reference to Vadhaki Gama, that is, we have a village of 1000 family of carpenters or woodcutters who are working on woods. So, this is highly localized. Then we have references to kammaragama also, where also we find reference to 1000 families. Now, the term 1000 or 500 may be conventional, but what is important is that they were localized in a particular sector. Even in the urban space, we have names of roads in the name of a particular craft group. For example, we have malakara vithi. So, which means though malakaras lived in that particular lane and that particular area. Romila Thapar feels that these people were localized not only in the urban space, but also we have to notice that the physical occupation of a particular space was identified with the particular craft group. K.K. Thapliyal has worked a lot on the nature of the guilds, and he mentions that we had guilds in the Vedic period also, though we do not have much evidence about it. Then we have guilds in the age of the Buddhas and Buddha and Jaina Mahavira. In the Mauryan period also experienced guild, though it was much more state controlled. In the post-Mauryan period also, and in the Gupta period, the guilds continued in the Indian context. The guilds were twofold. One was the craft guild, other was the traders guild. But what is interesting and important to note is that the crafts guilds had generally hereditary succession, which is not always noticed in a merchant guild. The reason for the proliferation of crafts and the organization of guild, according to Thapliyal, is that with the coming of the new religions, Buddhism and Jainism, the society moved away from the earlier practices of yajna, that is sacrifice, where a large amount of material wealth and animal wealth, for example cows and other things, had to be sacrificed and were given up. So, now in this society the material wealth was there and this was used for trading purpose. Moreover, both the religions, Buddhism and Jainism, did not have any taboo regarding pollution or purity. So, the merchants or the craft groups who were followers of Buddhism or Jainism, they could easily move from one place to another, live in different kinds of places, stay with different kinds of people and have their food. So, there was no restriction in the movement or in eating. Therefore, they could easily go for long distance trade. So, along with the traders, the crafts group, the specialized craftsmen also sometimes moved from place to place, and therefore, we have reference to itinerant craftsmen who moved from one locality to another. We find that the guilds were never interested in getting political power. They were more localized and they were happy with their own organization. But when a situation arose where suppose there was a choice of a ruler, then they must be having their own say, because we find that the guildsmen or the heads of the guilds had some position in the royal court. We find that the heads of the guilds accompanied Shuddhadana in welcoming the Buddha, and even when Bimbisara went to pay a visit to the Buddha, the heads of the guilds were with him. So, you have the guild heads getting some kind of position in the royal court. Regarding the guild laws, we have reference of Vasistha Dharmasutra, which gives the idea that the guild laws were final and a guild has to abide by the guild laws as well as the state laws. But when suppose there is a boundary dispute among the guilds, so it was the guild law which prevailed. So, therefore, the Sreni or the guilds in this period was very important as an organization, and this could happen only because of diversification of crafts, specialization of crafts and localization of crafts. But apart from the craftsmen, we have reference to other professions. For example, we have physicians like Veja, and we have reference to Jivaka, who was a very famous physician of his time. Then we have mention of surgeons, Sallakatta. The entertainers are very common in the social milieu. Natto, nattaka are always referred to. Then we have reference to Ganano, that is the accountant, and these all formed the larger part of the sippa of the Buddhist canon. And why this sort of crafts were becoming so important and why there was proliferation of crafts is also evident from the fact that because of the forest resources and other kinds of resources of the Ganga valley, we find that the resources were being utilized for making certain things. For example, sugars were crushed and made into sharkara. Then different wools, yarns, cotton, these were turned and fibers were being made from this. Timbers were used for building materials. Animal skins were used for hides. So, you have different kinds of agricultural as well as animal products which could give rise to a variety of occupations. The importance of the guilds did not minimize in the succeeding period also. But what we find in much later period is that the cohesive character of the guilds were no more, and therefore, in a particular guild organization we notice a number of jatakas, and when you have a number of heads, so naturally the cohesion was completely distorted, and therefore we find decline of the guilds. The crafts that continued for a very important period were those of the potter, that is the kumbhakara, and the kammara. Kumbhakaras were also referred to as kolalas, and kammara kumbhakara combination as an important craft group can be visualized from the field archaeological materials, where you have a large amount of iron implements, large amount of potteries from excavations of different early historic sites. Proliferation of crafts in the post-Mauryan period became possible because urbanization reached its zenith during that time. Craft specialization became very important, and therefore we have a number of groups which formed a very important part of the socio-economic milieu of the society right from 6th century BC to at least 3rd century AD during the time of the Kushanas.